On my granddaughter's 7th birthday, I wheeled in a projector, clicked play on their secret group chat, and, while the candles were still flickering, disinherited them live on camera. In 3 minutes they watched the fake fundraiser vanish, the liens and repossession orders roll out, and the deed gifting the lakehouse to a veterans retreat fill the screen, every dollar rerouted straight past them to my grandkids. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. My name is David. I am 67, a widower, and a grandfather who still keeps a wooden toolbox in his truck because hands that have held babies should also know how to steady a door, tighten a hinge, and fix a wobbly step. I spent 40 years making other people's homes safe. Inspector by trade, neighbor by habit, family man by choice. When my Teresa passed 5 years ago, I poured everything left of me into my son Mark, my daughter Susan, and the only legacy that did not fade in a hospital room's fluorescent light, 3 grandchildren with knees skinned from real running and laughs unspooled like kite string. I did what fathers do, and what widowers often overdo. I co-signed a loan for Susan's yoga studio because she said banks do not respect women of balance. I paid Mark's tax penalty when his side hustle, something about day trading in new coins, fell apart. I left my front door unlocked for Saturday drop-offs and Tuesday emergencies and kept a drawer stocked with coloring books and spare inhalers. I sat at bleachers even when my back said no. I answered phones at 2 in the morning with, "Are you safe?" and not, "What now?" There is a quiet kind of pride in being needed. The trap is that you stop noticing when needed becomes used. The first shift was small. They began to call me old man as a joke. Once, twice, then as punctuation, "Old man, got $20 on you." "Old man, you are slow." "Old man, you would not get this." It is fine, I told myself. The words do not matter when the laughs come from people you love. Then the laughs kept going when I did not smile. When I misheard something, Mark mimed twisting a hearing aid that I do not wear. Susan began narrating slow explanations to me the way a teacher explains to a child who has not slept. The grandchildren looked at their parents, learning the shape of those laughs. Then I noticed my name had changed inside my family's phones. It happened because Lily, who loves my workshop like a second playroom, asked if she could use my old tablet for her art. I said yes, of course. I wiped it clean, set up parental controls, and watched her draw for an hour, squeaky lines growing into castles, clouds, a very determined dog. When she left it on the couch for a snack, a familiar chime sounded. A message bled through from the cloud, a leftover thread I had forgotten to cut, Operation Muzzle Grandpa. The group chat had been created 2 months prior. The icon was a laughing face with a taped mouth. The name changed daily, Porch Fossil, ATM with Shoes, Inheritance Planning Committee. It was my children and their spouses. The first message that day was from Mark. He showed Lily the workshop. "Keep him away from the saws. If he loses a finger we will be stuck with hospital bills." Susan replied, "We need to get him evaluated. Confuse him a bit at dinner. Get it on video. Dementia case makes court easy." Tina, my son's wife, added a string of little icons that meant laughter. Then from Josh, my daughter's husband, "Either way, we need the lake place on the market by summer. My truck is dying. He is sitting on money with that place." It is strange, the things your body remembers in sudden cold. As a child, I fell through a thin sheet of creek ice one January, just ankles deep, but the bite of water up my calves stamped itself into me. Reading those words felt like my skin had been lowered back into that creek. My face went hot and my hands went numb. For a long minute, The room could have burned and I would not have felt it. I did not confront them. Not that day. I had learned something about structures by working with houses. If a beam is rotten, you do not lean on it and hope. You take measurements, shore it up from the other side, and prepare the new load paths before anything is cut. I began with observation. The chat kept chirping without their realizing my old tablet was still tethered to their thread. It was dull sometimes, petty bickering and gossip about cousins. It was poison other times. They mocked the way I talked to cashiers by their first names. They mocked my handwriting. On a day I had mowed Susan's backyard because the grass stood above her knees and the city ticketed her, she posted a grainy photo of me pushing the mower and wrote, "He moves like amber." Tina replied, "We just have to keep him sweet. He still has those rental duplexes." And the lakehouse. The lakehouse. The place I had rebuilt with my hands after a storm knocked it flat 20 years ago while the kids were still in high school, when my hair was pepper and Teresa laughed across water. The place where Ethan learned to bait a hook and where Grace and Lily turned towels into superhero capes. To them it was simply keys on a ring. To me it was four walls that knew my wife's quiet voice. One night, in that same chat, I watched them plan what time of year I would be most persuadable. "Late March is rough," Susan wrote. "He gets weepy about Mom's birthday. We hit him then with the downsizing pitch." The next morning, I brought Lily to school and Ethan to a soccer practice and adjusted my plans. They wanted late March. I wanted my lawyer in place by early March. Gloria is the kind of attorney who listens all the way to the end of a breath. She had handled small things for me over the years, a boilerplate lease, a title search when I bought a duplex from a retiring couple who needed fast cash. She has seen the way I dress, work boots, old jacket, and never once spoken down. When I told her about the chat, her jaw set in a mechanical way, like she was checking a brace. She did not rush me into fury. She led me into clarity. First, Gloria said, "Stop giving anyone cash. We will document every loan you have already given with promissory notes, repayment schedules, and collateral agreements. We will put your properties into a trust, revocable for now. We will add a clause that places future control with a co-trustee of your choosing, not your children, if you die or if there is actual medical proof of incapacity by 2 doctors of your own picking." She slid a form toward me, then another. Second, we will record protective deeds. The lakehouse, you can create a life estate for yourself and designate a beneficiary. If you want that beneficiary to be a charitable organization, you can ensure the property cannot be sold by anyone claiming to speak for you. You can still use it until your last day. We can structure a donation so it still benefits your grandchildren without handing keys to your children. I watched her pen. She watched my face. Third, she said, softer, we will collect what you have. Do not record anyone. Just save screenshots of this chat. Print them with timestamps. Note when you have been mocked, pressured, or when they have discussed manipulating your medical care. I will advise you on reporting if they step into actual exploitation. It is hard to stop being generous on a dime. So I did not stop. I adjusted. Where I had been, yes, I became, yes, and here is a document. When Mark asked for help catching up on his truck payments, I said yes, and had him sign a promissory note with the truck as collateral, the title signed but kept in my file with Gloria. When Susan asked for a loan to cover 2 months of rent at her studio, I said yes, and filed a UCC lien on her business assets so my help stood before her impulsive yoga mat supplier. I began to see that the fairness I had avoided out of fear of being cold was a kind of warmth that did not leak. Still, nothing prepared me for the fundraiser. Late on a Wednesday, the chat chirped with the kind of glory people reserve for small victories. Launched, Tina wrote. She pasted a link. Family needing help with a stubborn elderly father who refuses to accept care. He is alone, hoarding dangerous tools, falling frequently, refuses to eat, and hides funds while his daughter struggles to run a business that empowers women. There was my face in 2 dimly lit candid photos, both taken at bad angles, both making me look like a ghost. They had raised $500 in 3 hours. I do not know whether I felt more humiliated by the lie or by the idea of strangers pitying me so easily. What made my decision easy was what came the next day. This is working, Josh wrote. People love the grandpa angle. If we tell them he yelled, we could get it trending. I called Gloria. She took swift action I did not anticipate. A letter went to the platform hosting the fundraiser with screenshots of the chat that proved their knowledge of the falsity, signed by her. Another letter to my children, and to Tina and Josh, laid out defamation, fraud, and elder exploitation and invited them to take the fundraiser down within 24 hours and refund the donors or face a civil action and a referral to the district attorney. She sent me copies. The words were like sheet metal, plain and sharp. The fundraiser vanished that afternoon. In the chat, they blamed me for being litigious. It was the first time in my life anyone could say that, but if the label fits only when you use it to protect your name, then I can wear it. Gloria asked me what my endgame was. Not paperwork, not the defensive posture. What does justice look like to you, David? Not revenge. Justice. Boundaries that hold, I said. And the grandchildren kept safe from learning that cruelty is a family dialect. Then give them a moment to hear themselves, she said. A clean mirror. I thought of the one mirror I could hold that they would not be able to put down, a screen with their own words, in a room where performance collapses under the weight of real eyes. I chose Lily's 7th birthday because it was already on the calendar at my house. Susan had asked for my living room because it was larger and because the backyard could hold 30 of Lily's classmates chasing a rented magician. She had said, tender, you know Lily loves your place because it smells like wood and apples. That is the thing about manipulation, it wears please and thank you when it wants something valuable. In the 2 weeks before the party, I made one more adjustment. I cleaned, not just the way people clean for company, but the way you clean when you are about to hand the keys to someone trustworthy. I found photographs in boxes that had never been sorted, put them in albums with names handwritten. I oiled the hinges on the pantry door. I set aside a drawer for each grandchild in my workbench and put their names on the fronts, Ethan's with a little carved boat, Grace's with a flower, Lily's with a bird that looks like a kite. It was an act of hope, that this house could remain a safe place after whatever light I was about to flick on. On the morning of the party, I rehearsed what I would say. Not a speech. A spine. It had 3 corners. The first was truth. The second was consequence. The third was a door left open for those who would meet me clean. They arrived like they always did, an hour late, carrying more opinions than supplies. Susan brought the cake but not candles. Mark brought music that he did not play, because he commandeered the grill and burned the hot dogs while talking loudly into his phone with someone named Mike, crypto fixer. Tina arrived loaded with bags of decorations she did not unwrap because she had to design the vibe. Josh paced in my driveway on a call about a client who was trying to nickel and dime him. The grandchildren ran to my workshop. I watched their parents call after them, be careful with his ancient gadgets, as if the workbench were a beast. At 3 o'clock, the magician stirred 30 children into foam. Parents lingered with paper cups. The sun was the color of a lemon rind. I said I had a slideshow to play in the living room before presents. Just a few photos for Lily, I said, and everyone cooed like this was normal. The grandchildren sprinted to the couch. The parents leaned in the doorway, too curious to avoid. On the screen, Teresa in a canoe, laughing with her hair in a scarf. Me holding baby Mark with an expression that I now realized was terror painted as joy. Susan at 5, all curls and scraped shins, with cake on her ear. Then a quick photo of Lily in her cape, Ethan with his fish, Grace with a headlamp turned too bright, turning her face celestial. The room softened. You need the soft before the cut. Then the next slide. The group chat icon, on a black background. The title, Operation Muzzle Grandpa. A cascade of messages, dated, time-stamped, with names at the edges. Silence fell like a dropped plank. I did not pause. I let them read. I let them watch their own words arrive across my television. He moves like amber. Confuse him a bit at dinner. If he loses a finger we will be stuck with hospital bills. We need the lake place on the market by summer. A few parents in the back made noises that people make at movies when something audacious happens. The magician, who had wandered inside for a sip of water, froze with a silk scarf in his hand. David, Susan started, her voice already climbing. You are misinterpreting. I lifted a hand. It is not open to interpretation. These are your words. You did not have to say them. But you did. Mark said, screenshots can be faked. Which is why I printed them with their metadata and had our attorney send you copies 2 weeks ago, I said, calm because I had not chosen surprise as a weapon but as a reveal. Which is why the fundraiser went down. Because your attorney told you the words meant what they meant. Josh began to call someone. Tina stared at her shoes. I clicked to the next slide. The fundraiser page. Their words. My face. The lie. Then the next slide. A letter from Gloria. Then the next. A list of promissory notes with their signatures, and photos of the items they had put up as collateral, Mark's truck title, an equipment list from Josh's landscaping business, a lien filing page for Susan's studio inventory. It was not cruelty. It was framing. People who work with would know how much a frame does to tell a story straight. I love you, I said, and meant it because love does not evaporate, even when it changes state. But I am going to speak in a language you have chosen to respect, consequences. This is what will happen next. I handed them envelopes. Mark's had a notice of default and a schedule for repossession if he did not catch up. Susan's had a copy of the UCC lien and a clause that allowed me to take her mats and blocks if payments were missed by more than 60 days. Josh's included his loan agreement and a notice that missing this month's payment would trigger a transfer of the equity in his company that he had pledged. Attached to each was the page that said, "Your father did not do this to you, you agreed to it when you borrowed from him." You would really do this to your own children, Mark said, loud and theatrical for the onlookers. He looked toward the other parents as if collecting witnesses. A few averted their eyes. The magician put his scarf down gently, like it might be flammable. You did it to yourselves, I said, not raising my voice, because truth spoken low sounds like a bell. I am done funding your contempt. As of yesterday, all my properties were placed into a trust. I am the trustee for as long as I live and choose. The successor trustee is not you. It is Gloria. The lakehouse has been given a life estate to me, and then it will pass to a local veterans retreat. You will not sell it. You will not list it. You will not even get the keys unless you stand on this porch with me. And I will be here, if you are decent. They stared at me as if I had pulled a rabbit from a hat and said the rabbit would now be making policy. Your inheritances have been paused, I said. Not cancelled. Paused. The part of my estate that would have gone to you now goes into educational trusts for your children, with strict distribution schedules. When Lily is 18 and needs books, she calls Gloria, not you. When Ethan gets into a trade school and needs tools, he calls Gloria. When Grace goes somewhere and needs a deposit, she calls Gloria. You will not touch a cent. That is not spite. That is protection. You are punishing us, Susan said, trembling with rage in a way that a person trembles when they see themselves reflected suddenly and clearly. I am exposing you, I said. To yourselves. And I am done being mocked in a house I built. Then the part one had not scheduled happened. Lily stood up on the couch. She looked at the screen, then at her mother, then at me. She is 7, and the world is still either soft or sharp. Why would you make fun of Grandpa? She asked her mother, with the audacity of children, which is to say, the clarity of love untrained by strategy. The room swallowed. Susan reached for her. Lily pulled away and slid off the couch and walked to my side. Grace followed. Ethan, older and more awkward with declarations, edged close and touched my elbow. I clicked the projector off. Time for cake, I said. You do not punish children with the absence of sugar because their parents have been ugly. We sang. The candles sputtered. I do not remember what Lily wished for, but I remember that her cheeks set when she looked at her mother, like a small captain deciding how to steer. After cake, I walked out onto the porch with Mark and Susan because some fights need air and because guests deserve a show they can excuse themselves from. Mark went first. You made us look like monsters. You wrote the script, I said. I held up the screen. You think you can strong-arm us with legal tricks, he said. You will die. We will be your next of kin. We will undo this. He smiled like people do when they believe their hands know how to open every door. You cannot undo an irrevocable trust that becomes irrevocable at my discretion, I said. And you cannot claim incapacity for me any more without meeting the standards in the document, which you will not. And you cannot sell what has been donated to a charity. Levers only move what is placed on them. You have always loved words, Susan said. Now you are hiding behind them. I am standing behind them, I said. So they can do their job when I am tired. It could have escalated. Voices know how to climb. But in the living room, Lily laughed at a card that popped open with a cartoon elm tree, and the sound reached us on the porch. It reset the tilt of the day. My children did not apologize. They did not vow to change. They did what people do when their mirror is held up so close it fogs. They left. Within a week, they tested the frame. Mark missed his truck payment and called to say it would be late because the bank messed up. That same afternoon, a tow truck carried his pickup away, with a deputy conducting a civil standby because I would not put a stranger in danger over my son's arrogance. Susan paid on time the first month, then failed the second. Gloria filed to take possession of the inventory she had pledged. The yoga studio shut its lights for a week. She told anyone who would listen that her father had destroyed her dream. She did not tell them she had chosen her dream to be sedated by the exact man she had planned to sedate. Josh attempted to deliver landscaping services with equipment held together by zip ties. He missed his payment. I took the equity stake he had pledged and became the owner of the business he had named with 3 words and no imagination. He came to my house to shout on my lawn. I stepped outside and told him what I would have told any man having a public tantrum: "You are frightening the neighbors, you are not frightening me, because I have looked at hospice monitors that go silent." He left. Later, he came back with a resume. We renamed the business in a way that meant something. We called it Straight Edge Grounds because the word straight edge is both a tool and a pledge. I hired 2 men from the neighborhood who needed second chances, one who had made a stupid decision with a friend who stole a bicycle when they were 19 and had paid for it for 10 years, and one who had drifted after a plant closed. We showed up on time. We charged a fair rate. We trimmed lawns without whipping soil. We did not throw empty water bottles in customers' trash cans. We did the little things because houses notice. Money is not salvation. It is a lever, like Gloria said. Used well, it moves a load. I sold 1 duplex to create a fund I called Teresa's Proof, a pool of money that would pay for small things for the grandchildren that their parents would not notice until the kids found delight and told them. A violin for Grace, because she said the sound made her ribs feel like lanterns. A set of tools for Ethan, because when his hand closed around the weight of a ratchet, his shoulders set like he had finally picked something that fit. Lily wanted to make a water garden. We bought a half whiskey barrel and a pump and a lily pad that stubbornly refused to be a metaphor. People asked whether I missed my children. I do, the way a person misses a tooth they have had pulled. Your tongue keeps going there. You are reminded by absence. You decide whether to worry the gap or to let your mouth relearn its shape. I learned to stop inviting pain to dinner. I did not, however, close the door. We had rules. When Mark and Susan wanted to come by, they texted Gloria. When they wanted to talk, they sat at my table and put their phones in a bowl. When they began with blame, they were asked to leave. When they began with "I," we stayed. We had 3 such attempts. On the 4th, while standing in my driveway, Mark did something I had not seen in that man since he was a boy who broke a window and believed the house would fall if he told me. He cried, and not the performative kind. He told me he had been scared since Teresa died. Scared of money. Scared of judgment. Scared he had already become the man he never wanted to be, and if he looked into my eyes, he would see that fear confirmed. He blamed me for being solid because he was water. Then he asked if there was a way back. There is a way forward, I said, and noted the distinction. The past is not a hallway we get to revisit. It is a diagram of what trusses held and what sagged. You will not call me old man when you are angry. You will not ask me for money. You will pay your debt according to the schedule. You will apologize to your sister without adding a "but." You will apologize to my grandchildren for teaching them that cruelty is a form of intimacy. You will show up for work tomorrow at Straight Edge Grounds with boots on your feet and silence in your mouth and a willingness to cut clean lines. We can be men together, quietly. He was there at 6 the next morning. He cut lines so clean that the edges of a church lawn looked like paper. He did not speak except to ask whether he had done a thing correctly. He paid attention. He went home tired in a way that rubs off shame. Susan took longer. She blamed me for the studio, then blamed the city for a dubious fee, then blamed air. One afternoon, she stood at the foot of my driveway and called me a tyrant. A neighbor walking his dog paused, unsure whether to intervene or to pretend to be invisible enough to carry peace. The next day, Susan returned with Lily and a mason jar of unacceptable cookies. She cried and said she was afraid that if she said she was wrong once, she would be required to be wrong forever. I told her that apologies are not the heavy thing they appear to be from a distance. When you carry them, you notice the weight is proportionate to the hurt, and nothing more. She apologized to Lily first. I watched my granddaughter's back straighten like a spline being put into a digitized image. Children know the heft of real contrition. They are not impressed by its volume. Boundaries are not a wall. They are a fence with a gate that opens from the inside, and I chose when to unlock it. I invited my children to dinner once a month. Not holidays. Ordinary Tuesdays. I served meals that required chewing. We did not talk about money. We talked about Granny Teresa's recipes and which movies have endings that do not betray the beginning. I told them what their names meant to their mother and me. Mark remembered how to make a corny joke without using it to cut. Susan began to bring her hands to her face when she laughed in the same way she did when she was little, amazed that her body could contain a noise so large. The day the lakehouse went to the veterans' retreat, I drove out early. I put a hand on the doorframe like a man saying goodbye to an oak he planted when he was young and is now too large to trim without help. In the afternoon, a van pulled up and 4 men stepped out, shoulders squared by a different kind of weight than I have ever had to carry. They walked through the house as if it might startle. One of them stood for a long time at the window where the water sums up the sky and then said, "The quiet here is rapt." They shook my hand like it meant something. We sat on the porch and I told them where the toolboxes were and which steps creaked and which stones in the path were loose because unintentionally keeping secrets about safety is the only crime I can feel in my palms. That evening, I took the grandchildren out on the water in a rental boat that made a noise like a content cow. We watched the retreat staff hang wind chimes. Lily said, "This is still ours." "It is ours in a way that hands cannot lock," I said. "That is the best kind of ours." Ethan looked out across the water like a boy measuring the distance a one-day boat can travel. Grace flicked the side of the boat with her finger and timed the ripples. I suppose this is the part where a story like this should announce whether my children became saints or devils. They became people. They are still capable of being unkind. They are still learning the muscle memory of apology. They slipped, and then noticed, and then called me to say they had slipped. I did not hand them back the keys. I did not pretend we had returned to a year when my wife's voice filled the house with evening. I kept the trust. I kept the business. I kept my gate. A year after the birthday party, Lily turned 8. She wanted her party at a park near my house, not in my living room, because she wanted to run without anyone telling her to quiet down by pointing at my old things. I brought the projector anyway. I did not play the chat. I played a video Teresa had made for the children when the doctor was honest. She spoke about how to carry grief like you carry a heavy bowl, 2 hands, steady, no sudden turns. She said, "You do not have to be gentle with me in memory. You can laugh. You can even be reckless. I am not porcelain." Lily said, "To everyone and no one, she sounds like warm." At the end of the afternoon, Mark stayed to help load folding chairs. He carried 4 at a time because he thinks strength is a way to apologize. Susan carried the cake tin and asked whether she could come by later to plant a small herb garden near my porch with Lily. We had become a family that sometimes asked for small things that were not money. As for personal gain, the kind the old stories pretend is the entire point, I took it. I did not apologize for it. I sold 1 more duplex and bought a small recreational vehicle, pale green, with cabinets that click shut like certainty. I drove to a national park and sat at a picnic table and ate a sandwich at the speed of a man whose calendar had once been used as a public utility. I came back and hired a young man who loved blades of grass the way some people love sentence diagrams, and the business doubled in its second year because attention and kindness scale in a way hustle does not. At night, I opened Teresa's old cookbooks and wrote notes in the margins about which recipes had worked with the grandchildren and which had failed in ways that created stories I wanted to hear them tell when I am not here. On quiet mornings, I walk around my house and touch the places that used to be invisible. The spot on the wall where a chair rubbed a circle over years. The window catch that is not aligned but holds anyway. The nick in the kitchen table where Mark once tried to open a jar with a knife when he was 12 and defeated it by accident. I am not sentimental the way people caricature grandfathers. I am simply attentive. The difference is dignity. If I sound satisfied, it is because I am not performing pleasure for an audience that requires a twist. I got to reclaim my house without setting fire to it. I got to expose my family's cruelty without making cruelty my new grammar. I got to become the steward of my own old age. That is not vengeance. That is maintenance. People in my orbit still whisper about the birthday party with the projector. They say it was shocking. They say it was cold. They say it was brilliant. They say it was cruel. I say it was structural. A beam was rotten. I measured. I set a new load path. And when my grandchildren run down my hallway now, the floor does not make a sound I fear. It makes the sound of children in a house that will still be standing when I am not in it. If my children learned anything, it is that love without a spine is just a puddle. If I learned anything, it is that my job as a grandfather is not to be nice, it is to be good. Goodness is choosing truth when lies would make the weekend smoother. Goodness is making sure the fruits of my work land in the hands of those who will carry them with care. Goodness is setting a table that they may or may not sit at and cooking enough anyway. Hearts break. Then they beat. Families fracture. Then they decide whether to be cut glass or glued wood. I did not get to choose how my children first behaved. I did get to choose the tools I used next. I chose a projector and a lawyer, a tow truck and a fence, a trust and a boat on a lake. The day after Lily's 8th birthday, she came over alone and sat at my workbench. "Can I carve something?" she asked, serious like a worker who has shown up to her first shift. I handed her a piece of soft pine, a small knife, and a lesson. We took an hour to make a shape that could eventually be a bird if you stood far enough away and did not squint. She held it up and frowned. "It is not right." "It is not finished," I said. "Those are different." She smiled and put it in her drawer with the little bird carved on the front. She drew a label on the wood in pencil, "Lily's almost bird." I left it at that. Futures take shape when patience is taken seriously. When she left, I went out onto my porch and breathed in an evening that did not cost money and would not ask me to put my name on anything. Down the street, I could hear a mower. Somewhere in the lake's direction, a wind chime announced someone thinking about sleep. I leaned on the railing I had sanded 3 times the week before, just because the span of wood under your palm is what you notice, not the architectural drawings filed in a drawer.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to the story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.